What if the first question on a blind date had nothing to do with money, success, or love, but revealed the only truth that could change two lives forever? On a cool October evening, gentle rain traced silver lines across the tall windows of Magnolia House, an elegant restaurant overlooking the glowing Nashville skyline. Inside, soft piano music drifted through the candlelit dining room while quiet conversations blended with the delicate sound of crystal glasses meeting polished tables. Among the well-dressed guests, Ethan Walker looked exactly like the magazines described him. At 43, he was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America, a respected business leader whose logistics empire reached from coast to coast. Investors admired his decisions. News anchors praised his vision. Competitors envied his success. Yet none of those headlines ever mentioned the most important part of his life. Every morning before sunrise, Ethan packed a school lunch with handwritten notes hidden beside fresh fruit. Every evening, no matter how demanding the board meetings had been, he sat beside his 11-year-old daughter Lily until she fell asleep with a storybook resting across her blanket. Ever since losing his wife 6 years earlier, he had measured every choice by a single question. Would this make Lily feel safe? His younger sister Claire believed he had spent enough years hiding behind work and responsibility. After months of patient encouragement, she finally persuaded him to accept one blind date. Ethan agreed only because she promised there would be no expectations beyond dinner and conversation. Even as he entered the restaurant, he wondered whether he should simply turn around and leave. Relationships belonged to another chapter of his life, one he had quietly closed to protect the fragile peace he had rebuilt for his daughter. A hostess welcomed him with a warm smile and guided him toward a quiet table near the windows. Waiting there was a woman whose appearance was remarkably simple yet impossible to ignore. Emily Brooks wore a cream-colored sweater beneath a navy coat, her soft brown hair resting naturally on her shoulders and her calm blue eyes carrying a kindness that did not ask for attention. At 34, she worked as an elementary school teacher in a small Tennessee town. Few people knew she had spent her entire life being compared with her identical twin sister, whose outgoing personality often drew every eye in the room before Emily had spoken a single word. Years of quiet comparison had never taken away her gentleness. If anything, they had taught her to notice people others overlooked. Ethan introduced himself with a polite smile. Emily returned the greeting just as warmly. They ordered coffee instead of expensive wine, and for several peaceful moments neither of them hurried to impress the other. Outside, rain shimmered beneath the city lights while passing cars reflected across the wet streets like scattered stars. Ethan expected familiar questions about business, travel, or success. Instead, Emily folded her hands softly on the table and looked directly into his eyes with complete sincerity. "May I ask you something before we talk about anything else?" Ethan nodded. "Of course." Emily took a quiet breath before asking the question that seemed to stop time itself. "If your daughter could only keep one of us in her life someday, would you choose her without looking back?" The gentle music seemed to disappear. The conversations around them faded into silence. Ethan forgot every thoughtful answer he had prepared during the drive across the city because, within a single sentence, a woman he had known for less than 5 minutes had somehow reached the deepest promise he had ever made as a father. For several long seconds, Ethan simply looked at Emily without saying a word. The quiet confidence in her voice carried no judgment, no hidden expectation, and no attempt to impress him. She had asked the one question no investor, journalist, or business partner had ever considered asking. A server gently placed 2 cups of freshly brewed coffee onto the table before quietly stepping away, leaving the rich aroma to fill the silence between them. Ethan wrapped his hands around the warm ceramic mug, searching for the right words. Finally, he smiled with a sincerity that had been missing from his public life for years. "I would choose my daughter every single time," he answered softly. There would never be another decision. Emily's shoulders relaxed almost instantly. Instead of disappointment, relief appeared across her gentle face. She nodded as though she had just heard the only answer she had hoped for. Then you are already the kind of father every child deserves, she replied. Ethan tilted his head with quiet curiosity. Most people would think that answer ends any chance of a relationship. Emily smiled into her coffee before looking back at him. Only if they believe love is a competition. Children should never have to compete for the heart of a parent. Her words settled gently into the peaceful atmosphere of the restaurant while rain continued sliding down the windows behind them. Ethan realized he had spent years building billion-dollar companies, yet no boardroom conversation had ever felt as meaningful as the one unfolding across that small wooden table. You spend a lot of time thinking about children, he observed. Emily laughed softly. Occupational habit. I teach 4th grade. Every school day reminds me that children notice everything adults believe they are hiding. They know when someone is truly listening. They know when they are being rushed. They know when they matter. Ethan slowly nodded. My daughter noticed when I stopped smiling after her mother passed away. I thought I was protecting her by pretending everything was fine. Emily remained silent, giving him space instead of interrupting. One night, Ethan continued quietly, she climbed onto the couch beside me and handed me one of her coloring books. She said, Daddy, maybe you forgot how to use colors. I realized she was trying to save me. Emily lowered her eyes for a brief moment, touched by the image. She sounds remarkable. She is, Ethan answered. Everything good that still exists in my life begins with her. Outside, the rain slowly faded into a gentle mist while the lights of downtown Nashville shimmered across the wet sidewalks. The restaurant became quieter as late evening settled over the city. Emily stirred her tea thoughtfully before speaking again. May I tell you something? Ethan nodded. I have an identical twin sister named Olivia. Growing up, people confused us almost every week. She was always fearless, outgoing, and comfortable speaking in front of crowds. I was usually happiest reading books or helping children. After a while, I stopped trying to stand out. I learned that being kind was enough. Ethan studied her calm expression. There was no bitterness in her voice, only quiet acceptance shaped by years of experience. I do not think you disappear behind anyone, he said sincerely. I think people simply notice loud things before they notice meaningful ones. Emily smiled, and for the first time that evening her blue eyes reflected something brighter than politeness. They reflected hope. Neither of them realized that only a few miles away, 11-year-old Lily Walker was finishing her homework at the kitchen table while leaving one empty chair beside her, exactly as she had done every evening since losing her mother. None of them could have imagined that one simple conversation over coffee was already beginning to change the future of an ordinary little family searching quietly for another chance at happiness. The dinner ended so naturally that neither Ethan nor Emily noticed the restaurant had almost emptied around them. Waiters quietly folded linen napkins while the pianist played one final gentle melody before closing the evening. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the sidewalks glistening beneath warm streetlights that reflected across every puddle like scattered gold. Ethan walked Emily to her car without either of them feeling the need to fill every silence. The quiet between them no longer felt awkward. It felt peaceful. As Emily reached for the door handle, she turned back with a grateful smile. Thank you for answering honestly tonight. Ethan smiled in return. Thank you for asking the one question nobody else ever asked. Emily drove away, disappearing into the calm Nashville streets, while Ethan remained standing for another moment, watching the fading taillights with an unfamiliar feeling growing quietly inside him. Hope had not visited his heart in a very long time. The following morning began before sunrise. Soft orange light stretched across the Tennessee hills as Ethan prepared blueberry pancakes in the spacious kitchen of his Brentwood home. Lily sat at the island counter finishing a science worksheet while humming quietly to herself. Their mornings followed the same comforting routine every school day. Breakfast together. A handwritten note inside her lunch bag. A quick review of spelling words before leaving for school. Wealth had never changed those simple traditions. Lily looked up from her notebook and studied her father for a moment before smiling. "You are humming again." Ethan glanced at her with amused surprise. "Am I?" Lily nodded confidently. "You only hum when something makes you happy." Ethan laughed softly because she was absolutely right. "I met someone interesting last night." Lily rested her chin in her hands. "Interesting good or interesting strange?" "Interesting good," Ethan answered. Lily accepted the explanation with a satisfied smile before returning to her homework, somehow sensing there was no need to ask anything else. Nearly 30 miles away, Emily unlocked the door to her fourth-grade classroom at Maple Creek Elementary just as the first rays of sunlight reached the playground. Bright artwork covered the classroom walls, books filled colorful shelves, and every student's desk held a handwritten welcome note she had prepared before arriving. One by one, children rushed inside carrying oversized backpacks, excited stories, and endless questions about the coming weekend. Emily greeted every child by name. She noticed who looked sleepy, who seemed worried, and who needed an encouraging smile before lessons even began. During lunch, another teacher named Melissa sat beside her in the faculty room with an amused grin. "So," she asked quietly, "how did the mysterious blind date go?" Emily smiled into her cup of soup before answering. "He surprised me." Melissa leaned forward with curiosity. "That sounds promising." Emily looked through the cafeteria window toward children laughing across the playground. "He talks about his daughter the way most people talk about miracles," she said softly. Melissa smiled knowingly. "And what did that tell you?" Emily watched a little boy helping another student pick up dropped crayons before answering. "It told me that kindness is not something he performs. It is simply who he becomes whenever she needs him." Before Melissa could respond, Emily noticed one young girl sitting alone on a nearby bench. Without hesitation, she excused herself, walked outside, and sat quietly beside the child until a small smile slowly appeared. From the principal's office window, the school principal observed the entire moment with quiet admiration. She whispered almost to herself, "That is why every child feels safe when Miss Brooks is near." At that very moment, Ethan sat inside a glass conference room downtown surrounded by executives discussing numbers, contracts, and expansion plans, yet despite the billion-dollar conversation unfolding before him, his thoughts kept returning to a quiet teacher whose greatest gift was making every child she met feel like the most important person in the room. 3 evenings later, Ethan sent a message that was surprisingly simple for someone whose schedule was usually planned months in advance. "Lily has an art showcase at her school this Saturday morning. There is no pressure at all, but if you would like to come, I think she would enjoy meeting you." Emily read the message twice before smiling quietly. She was not nervous about meeting a billionaire's daughter. She was nervous about meeting the little girl who had already become the center of every meaningful conversation she had shared with Ethan. Saturday arrived with bright blue skies stretching across Middle Tennessee. Cool autumn air carried the scent of fresh leaves while families gathered outside the elementary school carrying coffee cups, homemade desserts, and cameras ready to capture another school memory. Ethan parked his old pickup truck instead of one of the luxury vehicles waiting in his garage because Lily always insisted it felt more like their family. As they walked toward the entrance, Lily slipped her hand into his without saying anything. After a few moments, she looked up. "Is your friend coming today?" Ethan smiled gently. "Only if you are comfortable with meeting her." Lily nodded after thinking carefully. "I think I am." A few minutes later, Emily stepped through the front gate wearing blue jeans, white sneakers, and the same cream sweater Ethan remembered from their first dinner together. In one hand she carried a small paper bag from a neighborhood bakery. There were no expensive gifts, no elaborate surprises, only a few homemade cinnamon cookies from a family-owned shop she visited every Saturday morning. Ethan greeted her warmly before kneeling beside Lily. "Sweetheart, this is Miss Emily." Emily immediately lowered herself to Lily's eye level instead of towering above her. "Hello, Lily," she said with a gentle smile. "Your dad told me you enjoy painting." Lily looked at her quietly for several seconds, studying her with the remarkable honesty children often possess. "Mostly trees," she answered. Emily smiled as though that was the most wonderful answer she could have imagined. "Trees are very good listeners," she replied softly. "They never interrupt your imagination." Lily blinked before letting out a small laugh that surprised even herself. Ethan noticed the sound immediately. It had been months since someone outside their family had made Lily laugh so naturally. Emily handed her the bakery bag. "I was not sure which cookies you liked best, so I chose cinnamon because they always remind me of autumn." Lily carefully opened the bag before looking back up with a grateful smile. "Thank you." Emily did not ask for a hug or try to impress her. Instead, they walked side by side into the school gymnasium where hundreds of colorful student paintings covered display panels beneath bright lights. They stopped in front of a watercolor landscape showing a quiet lake beneath a giant oak tree glowing in golden sunset colors. Emily admired the painting without reading the name attached to it. "This picture feels peaceful," she whispered. Lily looked almost shy. "I painted that." Emily turned back toward the artwork with genuine admiration. "Many people might think the tree is standing alone," she said thoughtfully. "I think it is protecting everything around it." Lily stared at her own painting with new eyes. Ethan remained several steps behind, silently watching the conversation unfold. As they continued walking through the exhibit, another little girl accidentally dropped a box of colored pencils across the hallway. Without hesitation, Emily knelt to gather every pencil before gently tying the child's untied shoelace and sending her back with an encouraging smile. She never noticed Lily watching every small act of kindness. A few moments later, Lily quietly tugged on Ethan's sleeve and whispered something he would never forget. "Daddy, she always notices children before she notices grown-ups." Ethan felt an unexpected warmth settle quietly inside his heart because he realized his daughter had seen the truth long before he ever found the words to describe it. The weeks that followed unfolded with quiet simplicity, and somehow those ordinary moments became far more meaningful than anything money could have arranged. Ethan never reserved exclusive restaurants or private resorts. Instead, he invited Emily into the real rhythm of his life, the places where there were no headlines, no investors, and no expectations beyond being present. On Wednesday afternoons, the three of them wandered through a small neighborhood bookstore where Lily always disappeared into the children's section while Emily searched for stories about courage, kindness, and adventure. Saturday mornings often began at the local farmer's market where Lily insisted on choosing the brightest sunflowers while Ethan carried baskets filled with fresh apples, homemade bread, and jars of local honey. Some afternoons they walked beside the peaceful trails at Radnor Lake, listening to birds singing overhead while crisp leaves crunched beneath their shoes. Other weekends they visited a community art center where Lily painted landscapes and Emily quietly encouraged every child nearby, never comparing one painting with another. Ethan noticed something that continued to surprise him. Emily never praised children for being the smartest or the most talented. Instead, she celebrated patience, curiosity, and kindness. She always found something beautiful in every effort. One rainy Sunday afternoon, they returned to Ethan's home after visiting a nearby museum. The warm scent of cinnamon candles welcomed them as Lily hurried upstairs to change into comfortable clothes. Family photographs rested on shelves beside handmade school projects, colorful drawings, and simple memories collected over many years. Emily looked around the living room and smiled softly. "Your house feels peaceful," she said. Ethan laughed quietly. "Lily says every room should tell a story." Before Emily could answer, Lily suddenly called from the staircase with disappointment in her voice. "Daddy, my bunny's ear came off." She carefully carried her favorite stuffed rabbit downstairs. One floppy ear had finally separated after years of bedtime hugs and childhood adventures. Ethan reached toward the sewing drawer before stopping with an embarrassed smile. I can fix business problems, he admitted, but I have never been very good with needles. Emily smiled gently. May I try? Lily immediately placed the little rabbit into her hands without hesitation. Emily threaded a needle with calm, practiced movements before sitting beside the large front window where soft rain tapped quietly against the glass. She repaired the loose ear one careful stitch at a time, never rushing, never treating the worn toy as something unimportant. While she worked, she told Lily about the old teddy bear her grandmother had repaired over and over throughout her childhood. The things we love the longest usually need the most care, she said softly. A few careful stitches do not hide the memories. They protect them. Lily hugged the rabbit against her chest as soon as Emily finished. It feels even stronger now, she whispered happily. Emily smiled. Sometimes healing makes something stronger than it was before. Ethan stood quietly near the kitchen counter pretending to organize coffee mugs, but his attention never left the scene unfolding beside the window. Emily did not know anyone was watching her. Her kindness was never a performance. It simply appeared wherever someone needed it. Later that afternoon, Lily invited Emily upstairs to see her newest paintings. Nearly an hour passed before they returned carrying a fresh canvas together. It showed 3 people walking beneath tall oak trees beside a calm lake glowing beneath the evening sun. The faces were only gentle silhouettes, but the feeling inside the painting needed no explanation. Lily held it proudly toward her father. Families can grow, she said shyly. Emily lowered her eyes with quiet humility, careful not to place any expectation upon either of them. Ethan looked from the painting to the 2 people standing side by side before realizing something he had not allowed himself to believe since the day he lost his wife. For the first time in many years, the empty places inside both his home and his heart no longer felt quite so empty. By the middle of November, the quiet routine they had built together felt as natural as changing seasons. Lily no longer hesitated before asking Emily to recommend another storybook or help her choose colors for a new painting. Ethan noticed himself smiling during meetings without realizing it, surprising coworkers who had grown accustomed to the serious executive who rarely spoke about anything beyond business. Even Claire quietly admitted that she had not seen her brother this content in years. It was not because his life had become easier. It was because someone had gently reminded him that joy often returned through ordinary moments instead of extraordinary events. Then, on a crisp Thursday afternoon, everything changed without warning. Emily stayed late after school helping other teachers prepare decorations for the annual Thanksgiving family celebration. Construction paper, handmade centerpieces, and colorful drawings covered the classroom as she carefully packed supplies into storage boxes before locking the door. Nearly 30 miles away in downtown Nashville, her identical twin sister Olivia Brooks stepped into the marble lobby of an elegant hotel after attending a corporate marketing conference. Olivia wore a tailored navy business suit and carried a leather portfolio while greeting clients with confident professionalism. Although the sisters loved one another deeply, they had chosen completely different lives. Olivia thrived in boardrooms, airports, and business presentations. Emily found happiness in classrooms, playgrounds, and children's laughter. Their faces were nearly identical, yet their worlds could not have been more different. Emily had mentioned Ethan to Olivia during a recent phone conversation and even shown her a family photograph of Ethan and Lily after describing how meaningful their friendship had become. Olivia smiled when she recognized him walking through the hotel lobby carrying several folders after finishing a charity foundation luncheon. Before she could introduce herself properly, Ethan looked directly at her and smiled with familiar warmth. "Emily," he said as he approached. Olivia politely returned the smile. "Hello, Ethan." Something immediately felt different. Her posture was more formal. Her voice carried the polished confidence of someone accustomed to business negotiations rather than classrooms filled with children. Before Ethan could ask another question, 2 executives joined Olivia and greeted her enthusiastically. "The conference room is ready," one of them said while handing her several presentation documents. Olivia offered Ethan an apologetic smile. I am sorry. I have a meeting I cannot miss. She disappeared toward a private conference suite surrounded by corporate colleagues, leaving Ethan standing quietly in the center of the spacious lobby. The entire encounter lasted less than a minute, yet it unsettled him far more than he expected. During the drive home, he replayed every second in his mind. Emily had always spoken about lesson plans, school projects, and her students with genuine affection. Why had she never mentioned corporate conferences or executive meetings? Had she simply chosen not to tell him everything about her life? The questions lingered long after he arrived home. Across town, Emily knew nothing about the misunderstanding quietly taking root. She spent the evening helping Lily practice watercolor techniques during a video call before grading spelling tests at her kitchen table. Ethan joined the call briefly, smiling politely but speaking far less than usual. Emily noticed the change immediately. His kindness remained, yet an unfamiliar distance had entered his voice. She wondered whether an especially difficult week at work had left him exhausted. She never imagined the real reason sat inside a single mistaken moment that neither of them had witnessed together. Outside, dry autumn leaves drifted across quiet neighborhood streets beneath a sky filled with early evening stars. Somewhere between two sisters who shared the same face but lived completely different lives, doubt had quietly entered a relationship that had been built upon honesty, patience, and trust. The days that followed settled into an unfamiliar silence. Nothing dramatic happened. There were no arguments, no accusations, and no harsh words. Yet Emily could feel the gentle warmth that had once filled every conversation slowly fading away. Ethan still answered her messages with kindness, but they became shorter, more careful, and strangely distant. Every sentence sounded respectful, yet something invisible had quietly changed. Emily read each reply without resentment. Years of teaching children had taught her that people sometimes carried questions they were not yet ready to ask. One evening she finally sent a simple message. Is everything all right? Ethan stared at the words for several long moments before typing only 4. Work has been busy lately. The answer was true, but it was not the whole truth. Emily smiled sadly before placing her phone on the kitchen table. She did not send another message. Trust, she believed, could never be demanded. If someone needed space, kindness sometimes meant giving them room to find their own answers. A few days later, the annual Thanksgiving Community Festival arrived in Brentwood. Families gathered beneath colorful banners while local musicians played familiar country songs from a small wooden stage. Children laughed as they carried caramel apples and cups of warm cider through rows of handmade craft booths. Ethan arrived with Lily just before sunset, carrying 2 folding chairs and a picnic basket Claire had insisted on preparing. Emily had originally planned to attend because several of her students would be performing in the children's choir, but after sensing Ethan's growing distance, she quietly chose to stay at school instead, helping decorate classrooms for the holiday break. She convinced herself that giving him time was the kindest decision she could make. The festival was beautiful, yet Ethan found himself searching every crowd without realizing it. Each time a woman wearing a cream sweater walked past, his eyes instinctively followed before disappointment quietly settled in again. Lily noticed much sooner than he did. She held a handmade watercolor bookmark she had painted especially for Emily, decorated with tiny oak leaves and the words, "Thank you for helping me see colors." She had planned to surprise her that evening. Instead, she carefully slipped it back inside her coat pocket. As darkness settled across the park, strings of warm lights glowed above long picnic tables while families gathered together for the evening concert. Ethan sat beside Lily listening to music, but his thoughts remained somewhere else entirely. Finally, Lily tugged gently on his sleeve. "Daddy?" He turned immediately. "What is it, sweetheart?" She looked down at the bookmark resting in her hands before speaking with quiet honesty. "Did Miss Emily stop coming because she thinks we stopped loving her?" Ethan felt his heart become unexpectedly heavy. "Why would you think that?" Lily shrugged softly. She always kept her promises. If she did not come today, maybe she believes she is not welcome anymore. Ethan had no answer. The cheerful music faded into the background as another memory quietly returned with perfect clarity. He remembered the rain against the restaurant windows on the night they first met. He remembered Emily looking directly into his eyes before asking the one question that had left him speechless. She had never asked about his companies, his houses, or the fortune everyone else seemed fascinated by. She had only asked what would happen if Lily could not accept her. In that moment, Ethan finally understood what he had failed to see. Long before Emily had hoped to become important in his life, she had wanted to make certain his daughter would always come first. That single question had never been about fear. It had been about respect. Sitting beside Lily beneath a sky filled with quiet stars, Ethan suddenly realized he had spent days questioning the character of the one person who had never given him a single reason to doubt her, and the silence he had created now felt far heavier than any misunderstanding ever could. The morning after the festival, Ethan canceled his first business meeting for the first time in months and turned his truck toward Maple Creek Elementary instead of the downtown office. Frost still covered the grass beside the sidewalks as school buses pulled into the parking lot one after another. Children hurried toward the entrance carrying oversized backpacks while teachers greeted every family with cheerful smiles despite the cold November air. Ethan remained beside his truck for a moment, taking a slow breath. Negotiating billion-dollar agreements had never frightened him, but admitting he had been wrong felt unexpectedly difficult. Before he reached the front doors, a silver sedan stopped nearby. A woman stepped out wearing a tailored navy business suit with a leather portfolio tucked beneath her arm. For an instant, Ethan froze. She looked exactly like Emily. The same blue eyes. The same soft brown hair. The same gentle smile. Emily, he called instinctively. The woman turned with a polite expression before laughing quietly. You must be Ethan Walker. Confusion crossed his face. You know who I am? She nodded warmly. I am Olivia Brooks. Emily is my twin sister. She has told me so much about you and Lily. In that single sentence, every unanswered question finally found its place. Ethan remembered the hotel lobby, the executives, the conference room, and the polished confidence that had seemed so different. Olivia noticed the realization spreading across his face. You saw me downtown last week, did you not? Ethan lowered his eyes with quiet embarrassment. I thought I had seen Emily. Olivia smiled kindly rather than critically. That has happened our entire lives. Emily usually laughs about it. She says people recognize our faces before they ever learn who we really are. Ethan sighed softly. Instead of asking one simple question, I allowed myself to wonder. Olivia's expression became gentle. My sister has spent years being compared with me. She never wanted to become someone else. She only hoped people would take enough time to know who she truly is. Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his own assumptions. I owe her an apology. Olivia glanced toward the school entrance where Emily had just stepped outside carrying colorful Thanksgiving cards created by her students. Before speaking with Ethan, Emily paused to zip a little boy's winter coat and helped another child gather dropped crayons that had scattered across the sidewalk. She smiled at every student by name, making each one feel seen before continuing toward the entrance. Olivia quietly folded her arms. That is my sister. She has always believed small kindnesses matter more than impressive achievements. Ethan watched silently. Nothing about Emily had changed. She was still the woman who noticed children before adults, who repaired a worn stuffed rabbit with patient hands, and who had asked about Lily before asking about his success. He walked toward her with steady steps. Emily looked up in surprise when she saw him waiting near the entrance. For a brief moment neither of them spoke. Dry leaves drifted gently across the sidewalk while the school bell echoed through the crisp morning air. Ethan finally broke the silence. I am sorry. Emily searched his face with quiet concern. What happened? Ethan explained everything honestly, from the mistaken encounter at the hotel to meeting Olivia only moments before. He admitted every doubt he had quietly allowed to grow without ever asking her a single question. Emily listened without interrupting, her calm expression never changing. When he finished, she smiled with the same quiet grace that had first captured his attention. Questions build bridges, she said softly. Assumptions build distance. Ethan nodded. I forgot that for a little while. Before either of them could say anything more, Claire arrived with Lily, who hurried across the sidewalk carrying the watercolor bookmark she had protected since the festival. Without hesitation, Lily wrapped her arms around Emily and placed the bookmark into her hands. I was saving this. For you, she whispered. Emily held the small painting carefully as tears brightened her eyes, while Ethan realized that the smallest heart among them had understood the truth long before the adults finally learned to trust it again. Winter slowly gave way to spring, and with each passing week the quiet rhythm of their lives became stronger than the misunderstanding that had once threatened to separate them. Ethan no longer measured success by quarterly reports or business headlines. Instead, he found himself looking forward to ordinary evenings around the kitchen table where Lily finished homework while Emily prepared tomorrow's lesson plans with colorful markers spread across the dining room. Their conversations were never rushed. Sometimes they laughed over burnt pancakes on Saturday mornings. Sometimes they walked beneath blooming dogwood trees without saying very much at all. Yet every shared moment quietly stitched another piece of their family together. Emily never tried to replace the memories of Lily's mother. She honored them with gentle respect, listening whenever Lily wanted to tell another story about the woman she still loved and missed. Ethan noticed that the empty chair Lily had always left at special dinners no longer represented loneliness. It had become a place of gratitude for the past instead of sorrow. Several months later, on a warm Saturday afternoon, Ethan invited Emily and Lily to the peaceful lake where Lily had painted the old oak tree that had once inspired her favorite watercolor. Fresh green leaves danced softly in the spring breeze while sunlight shimmered across the calm water. Birds sang from nearby branches, and wildflowers covered the shoreline with quiet color. There were no photographers waiting nearby, no business associates, and no elaborate celebration. Ethan wanted the moment to belong only to the three people who had quietly changed one another's lives. They spread a small picnic blanket beneath the familiar oak tree, sharing homemade sandwiches, fresh strawberries, and lemonade while Lily happily sketched another landscape in her notebook. After a while, Ethan stood and looked toward Emily with the same honesty she had first shown him months earlier. He reached into his jacket pocket and held a small velvet box, but before opening it, he turned toward Lily. There is someone I want to ask an important question today, he said gently. Lily smiled as though she had already known the answer for weeks. Ethan faced Emily with grateful eyes. The first question you ever asked me changed my life because it reminded me that real love protects a child's heart before asking for anything in return. You never tried to become the center of our world. You simply cared for us until one day we realized you already belonged there. Would you be willing to keep choosing this family with me, one ordinary day at a time? Tears quietly filled Emily's blue eyes as she nodded without hesitation. Yes, she whispered. Every single day. Lily laughed with pure happiness before wrapping both of them in the tightest embrace she could manage beneath the old oak tree. Early that summer, close friends and family gathered inside a small white chapel surrounded by blooming gardens. Claire smiled proudly from the front row while Olivia stood beside her twin sister with joyful tears shining in her eyes. The ceremony was simple, filled with handwritten vows, familiar hymns, warm laughter, and the peaceful feeling that every person present had come to celebrate love instead of luxury. Afterward, everyone gathered beneath strings of glowing lights in the church garden, sharing homemade desserts and quiet conversations that lasted until sunset. As evening settled across the countryside, Lily reached for Emily's hand while watching golden light reflect across the flowers. She looked up with complete certainty and softly asked, Mom, can we plant another oak tree when we get home? Emily gently squeezed her hand and smiled through grateful tears. I would love that. Ethan watched the two of them walk ahead together, realizing that the greatest blessing of his life had never been the fortune he had earned but the family that kindness, patience, forgiveness, and quiet dignity had allowed him to find. Sometimes the strongest families are not built by perfect beginnings. They are built by ordinary people who choose one another again and again until love quietly becomes home.